If you have good conversion, which means you have a good product, you've done everything wrong, that is only half the picture, because the other half is traffic. Your raise equals conversion times traffic.
You are watching the Creator Chronicles. Hi, I'm Arthur Papikan, and this is where we break down the silent mistakes that are happening through the different stages of a crowdfunding campaign. Every creator enters the crowdfunding field with a plan. But to understand whether this plan is actually in the right journey, you need to understand whether the timing is right. And today we have Bob with us, a product creator, investor, and advisor, who has seen, I believe, a lot of crowdfunding campaigns from different angles. Based on your experience, Bob, what's the biggest blind spot that creators continually fall into?
As you mentioned, I started with crowdfunding industry since 2016, so it's been almost a decade, and I've seen a lot of campaigns and projects, succeed and fail, me personally have been involved in at least 15 campaigns, all in all, and many of them have done really well. 7 figures, 6 figures, and a few of them, a handful of them, we've had some good lessons as well. And I think, to answer your question, the number one thing that's overlooked, and most people would take it for granted, is actually pricing. The reason being, when people move from a traditional e-commerce model or offline sales model, or they have never done any kind of sales, the mentality shift is quite different, because give an example, if people started with e-commerce, they either sell on Shopify or Amazon or TikTok, you name it, the profit calculation is very simple, right? So you have a production cost, and you have a retail sales cost price, and then you subtract the production cost and also the platform fee, and that would be a profit margin. And that would be sort of the same mentality that people bring when they move to crowdfunding. If a creator is starting net new, the simple understanding is that, okay, as long as I sell more than what it costs to produce, then I would end up in a profitable situation. But the reality is way more complicated than that. And you can probably sort of plot out a curve of any product when you launch. The curve being, if your price goes higher, then your audience drop, which makes sense, because less people are willing to pay for a more expensive product. Therefore, you shouldn't price your product too high, but you also shouldn't price your product too low, for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you price it too low, there are a lot of sort of hidden fees that creators don't really think about when they initially launch, and then later on realize, oh, we're now in a bit of a trouble. For example, you really cannot predict the marketing cost that's gonna incur in any given crowdfunding campaign, because it really depends on a couple of factors. ROAS, which is return on ad spend, or there's other marketing costs such as production of the video, influencer costs, so on and so forth. And with the ideal campaign, normally ROAS, this is the ideal scenario, which is hard to achieve. The golden ratio is 4x, which means you spend $1 in advertising and you get $4 in revenue. And even for that, you have to calculate 25% of your raise is going to go into advertising. And the platform takes 5% plus 3% processing fee. That's 8%. So that's already 33%. That's why if you don't do anything else. But there's also taxation, and a lot of times there's other hidden costs as well. So if the creator does not really calculate your profit margin correctly, you will end up in a situation where you might seem to have a good raise, but you're not able to fulfill, or you can fulfill, but your business is at a loss. The other reason that you shouldn't price it too low is also for the reason of marketing advertising, because that sort of is the constraint for you to scale. Let's say your advertising is converting really well, but as you spend more per day, your conversion rate automatically goes down. So that difference between your profit bottom line to your sales price is where you can scale, right? So the bigger the difference, the more room for you to scale, which means you can afford more advertising. Therefore, your campaign can turn from a 4-figure campaign to 5-figure to 6-figure, so on and so forth. So it's really critical and difficult to find that sweet spot where it's not priced too high and it's not priced too low. So you have enough room to be profitable, to deliver, and to scale. Yeah. But at the same time, you also maintain a good conversion rate. And traditionally, it's based on your experience and guessing. But now we have modern tools which you can do pricing A/B tests either through pre-launch or through a landing page, and that you can see what pricing works well. You want to go as high as you can without sacrificing the actual conversion rate, and that would be the sweetest spot. So that's number one point to answer your question that I think most creators do not pay enough attention to, and they end up in a not so ideal scenario.
Yeah, perfect. So to find the right spot for the pricing that's not too high, neither too low.
Yeah.
So what about the positioning? If a creator thinks that they are solving a problem for a very niche market,
yeah,
they want to put a relatively higher price. How is positioning affecting in this way to the price?
Oh, positioning is everything, right? So because positioning is basically communicating what your product can be used for, right? Which is essentially what people are paying for. People are not paying for the product itself in most cases. They're paying for the usage. They're paying for the benefit of the product. So you are effectively selling the benefit. But if you position the benefit in the wrong scenario, then people don't see the benefit. Therefore, they don't use it that way. To give you a good example, which is not my campaign, HoverAir, right, which has done very well in crowdfunding, and they're one of the most successful companies in the world in that category. They had a challenge, which is they're not the best drone. If you position as a drone on the market, obviously they're not as good as DJI, right? There's and it's different market because they're not aiming for like the same market that DJI buyers are in. Therefore, if you position it as a drone, I think their campaign probably would fail, and people wouldn't pay that price for that product because it's not, it cannot fly 1,000 meters high, because I think the max, because I own one, I bought one of retail. I think max can only fly like 20, 30 meters. So they position it as a flying camera.
Yeah.
So it's not a drone, it's a flying camera. With that, a little bit of a switch in positioning, then people's mentality change. People don't compare it with DJI anymore. They compare it with the iPhone. Now we have effectively a camera that can fly at different positions and do a lot of drone-like footages that traditional cameras cannot do, and the price point is reasonable. So they had their success, and that's how I use it as well. And it's light. You do not have to apply for permit in most cases, so you can use it in non-fly zones. So I think that is a great example of how positioning can really make an impact in the success of your campaign.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that false expectation can cause the failure for the positioning as well. So if we stick to the price, that's the main problem that creators are facing, and going deeper into the roots, where are they failing the most? Like, what's the point that they are differentiating the price in a wrong way?
To be honest, naturally, people believe the lower the price, the more people will buy.
Yeah.
Right? But reality tells us that's not the case, because I think the luxury brand on the market knows this really well, right? So what is the main difference between a Patek Philippe that sells 100K, 200K versus a a Seiko that sells for 5K. The difference is really small, but why people prefer to pay 100K to get that kind of watch is because there is a psychology in pricing, and it's human nature. People believe, oh, the more expensive, the better the product is. If a product is really cheap, people would assume, how can you make it so cheap? You must have cut corners. There must be something wrong with the product, right? So would you go for a 50 cents pasta, in Italy? No, right? So that would be a good example. But the situation is most creators, especially new creators, they have this temptation to price it as low as they can and hope for the best. Sometimes they might get a big raise, but like I said, then they ended up not being able to deliver a product, right? They might actually have to cut corners to deliver, or they're not able to deliver at all. So I think that is probably one of the biggest danger with new creators or creators that's moving to crowdfunding, to not think about pricing seriously and end up in a unfortunate situation.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Just in this case, in my opinion, that for Patek Philippe, for example, the niche is quite higher, and it's kind of giving exclusivity to people.
That's right.
Yeah, but in crowdfunding, the behavior is a bit different. So those are people who want to have the first hand on the innovations and to test it, to understand how everything is working, how the world of innovation is going further. How should this kind of behavior be injected into the strategy when creators are making the plan?
I think the typical sales psychology or marketing psychology still apply in crowdfunding, even though crowdfunding has its uniqueness. But I think most people go on crowdfunding, as you mentioned, wants to get the first access to good product. And I think crowdfunding platform is probably one of the best platforms out there to launch a niche product, because it's a niche product. Typically, it's hard to find. It's not available on Amazon or elsewhere. But if it's on crowdfunding, like Kickstarter has active 3+ million last time I learned, active users, and especially very tech-savvy users. So if your product is tech or design, you may very well have your niche market covered in that community. So I think you're in a good spot if you have a tech or design project or gaming project in that matter. I guess the question is, how do you model your business? And those are two very distinct ways to model your business. You either go for a very niche, small quantity but high margin model, which is a very good model if it can help your business grow, or you go with a mass market, low margin but large quantity, mass quantity product. And it really varies from product to product. And I would say, if your product is really unique and niche, and there's nothing out there, then you're in a good spot, because you effectively have the right to price for the entire market. Then it's what works for your audience. And I think, going back to pre-launch, it's probably worthwhile to check with the community, whether through A/B testing or have surveys, focus groups, you name it, to really get a temperature check how much your market is willing to pay. A recent example, one of the projects that I invested in for high-end headphones, the competitor products are priced very high, anywhere from 2-3K USD to 20-30K USD. And the team ended up pricing it for $699. And initially, but the production cost, is giving you a good margin. The team was a bit nervous, but ended up, people think the price is very reasonable, and people are willing to pay more. And they vocally say that if you can make the product slightly better, we're willing to pay anywhere north of $1,200 or more. So in that situation, it works really well for the team. So it really comes down to your business decision. do you want to make 100 units, or you want to make 50,000 units for the same profit margin? Sometimes the difference could be that. But obviously, I think if you can afford it and if your market permits and you have the pricing right because you have a really unique innovation, I would suggest at least try the high margin model so that you have enough room and manpower and bandwidth to focus on really perfecting your product, as opposed to start with the low price and have to mass produce in a very limited amount of time, ended up cutting corners and not having a good product.
Yeah, like a lot of founders are losing the price competition following the trends, like you mentioned on crowdfunding.
Yeah.
There are these famous categories: design, tech, gaming, or so on. So following the trends, a lot of creators are launching the same kind of products.
Yeah.
What should the ideal strategy be to launch at the same time as your competitor, still have a great margin, and maybe if it's your main goal, to have business that continues, like after crowdfunding?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of experience with these kind of scenarios, because the market moves very fast, right? So even if you were the first one to launch the first gen product, but when you launch your second gen, chances are, if you have been very successful, you already have competitors copying your products. I think going back to companies like Apple or Leica, these kind of really leading companies, leading brands out there, you need to do one or two things, at least one thing that's really, really good and nobody can compare, right? You don't have to be good at everything. For example, if you're doing a camera, you don't have to be the best, battery life, the highest resolution, you name it. But if you have one thing that's really unique, be that design or some other feature, and you can maintain your edge on that one thing, then effectively you have the pricing right. And chances are, with any industry, it will end up in a sort of a pyramid situation. And where you want to be is at the tip of the pyramid, where you want to be that one or two brands when people think about this category, they will think about, for example, Dyson, right? And then the rest is other competitors, then they really compete with pricing. But if you have that edge to be the go-to branding, then you can maintain a higher price point, but while still maintain the loyalty of your backer community.
Yeah, nice. You mentioned something that's very important to highlight once again, that while creating product, creators think that it should have like a perfect battery, be perfect at design and all the other functionals, and trying to hold all these functions in one hand, but they are flopping it in that way and trying to make a Swiss knife out of all the products that, if you would give one advice to all the creators that will sum it up, all this conversation, what would it be?
A practical advice would be really take your time, don't rush it, and understand your market, understanding your user base, make sure that you have a product that's really appealing to the market. And if I were to sum up crowdfunding, it comes down to numbers. Everything comes down to numbers, because as creators and businesses, you want bigger raise, you want higher conversion rate, so on and so forth. But it comes down to numbers. And believe it or not, I always say, your product, all your hard work, your marketing, and everything you've done in the past, be that social media, be that PR, design, only comes down to one thing, and that is conversion. Right? You have a good product, you have a higher conversion rate. You have good marketing, you have a higher conversion rate. And if you have good conversion, which means you have a good product, you've done everything wrong, that is only half the picture, because the other half is traffic. Your raise equals conversion times traffic. You have very limited traffic and you haven't really thought about it, you don't have a good enough budget, you don't have a professional team to help you with traffic, then your good product will never be known, and therefore you will not have a success. So your product, your marketing, your production, everything you know about is owning 50%. The other 50%, if not more, is traffic. Then you have to think about how to bring in traffic to make your product work. And my advice is go speak to people who have done it before, who has the knowledge about how to bring traffic. There are many ways to generate traffic, through social media, through community, backer communities, through advertising, which is one of the most reliable and common ones. But do not forget, traffic is the other half of the picture.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Bob, for being our guest today.
Yeah,
the conversation was very, very insightful. And thank you very much for watching this episode. If you have any kind of questions, make sure to leave those in the comment section. Also, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Stay tuned.